have to be honest, this might be the hardest episode I've ever had to record. I've actually recorded it a couple of times, and it was just a lot. And another one one of them I recorded, I left my headphones in another room, and they're Bluetooth, and I guess they stayed connected. So the entire thing sounds like I'm in the other room, and so I wasn't able to use them. So maybe it was, the universe's way of giving me a few practice runs before I actually went ahead and talked about this. But I struggle with how much detail to give in these experiences or situations that I'm talking about. I never want this podcast to be me complaining or, telling this. I don't want it to be like a storytelling session of me telling you the most horrible things that have happened to me in my life or anything like that. I just don't, that's not the purpose. And it's not who I am. I used to really identify with a lot of the things that have happened to me in my life, and now I don't. How do I explain it? When I would meet someone, I was always very open, almost immediately. I would tell them my life story, and I wanted to be down to earth. I wanted to come across as someone that was honest and open and transparent, but after I would do that, then later I would feel bad about it and feel like it was too much, and then I'd apologize because I was always second-guessing myself. And I got to a point where I started to, when I started learning about boundaries, I started learning about, not having to share everything. I had to kind of examine, why am I sharing these things? I was kind of not glorifying, but I was looking for, I was sharing things over and over again, and I was searching for some type of validation or some type of sympathy or empathy that I never ended up getting. Even when people would give it to me, it just wasn't fulfilling that need. And I had to really look at that and realize that nothing that anyone was going to say was going to make me feel better. It was something that I had to find for myself. So I think since then it's gotten more difficult for me to talk about things because I don't want to, overload somebody and overwhelm them. And when I talk about the things that I'm referring to, I feel like I'm going back to the place where I used to be. I feel really bad afterwards. I kind of feel like I have to wipe off that gunk from the old story or the old memory of what happened to me. So there's a lot that goes into it. So I may struggle through this. I also may end up having more than one episode about it because there's a lot to say. And I might end up cutting things out and things. But at any rate, it's about, what I'm about to talk about is my own experience with physical abuse in a relationship. And when I was a little girl, my father was abusive to my mother. Mentally, physically, emotionally. But he was physically abusive in very, very violent toward her in front of me as a young girl. I had to witness him beating her. And I had to witness him chasing her down to get to her, to beat her. And I remember, a couple of specific times where, this is all happening before I was 5 years old. And I remember crying and screaming and begging him to stop on her behalf. And that's something that's not going to ever go away. The way that felt isn't going to ever go away. And I've had to accept that as part of my life. But I think because I witnessed that when I got older and I went into relationships, I was comparing anything that resembled abuse, I would compare it to that, and it was never as bad as that. So I would allow it. I would tolerate it. And what I want to say about physical abuse, because that's the focus of this, domestic violence, is something that happens slowly over a long period of time, usually. And, the person that is the abuser doesn't usually start out that way. And I think it's difficult, maybe this is for another time to even go into, but I think it's difficult for people who haven't been through it to fully understand why someone is in that situation and why they stay in the situation as long as they do. But it has a lot to do with, I would call it like an erosion of the victim. The abuser is slowly chipping away at you. They're slowly belittling you. They're slowly making degrading jokes or mocking you or making fun of you as a victim. I say you, I mean me. That happens slowly. And sometimes it's played off as a joke, and then it gets to be a little more frequent, and then it gets to be a little meaner. Then it becomes in fights, there's name calling. Then it becomes a little bit violent. Then, the abuser's throwing things, the abuser's punching things. Then it gets closer to the victim where, and this is over a period of years. It doesn't happen overnight. So you almost don't see it happening. And then it gets to a point where it's a push, or a pull, or grab your arm and pull you back, And I was constantly, when these things started happening, I was just saying to myself, well, like, this isn't really abuse. And this wouldn't happen if my abuser wasn't drinking. He would never do that when he was sober. And, as I'm saying this, these are excuses I don't even realize I'm making. And I would just be like, well, he doesn't punch me. He doesn't, he doesn't beat me. He's just, when I'm walking away, grabbing my arm and pulling me back to try to, keep my attention or whatever. There's these stories we tell ourselves. And you're embarrassed, so you don't want to tell anyone. It's like you don't want anyone as a victim of abuse, you get to a place where you don't want anyone to think bad about that person. So you don't tell anybody. And you feel like you get frustrated with yourself, and you feel kind of like you don't know how to get out of it. You don't know how to stop it. And now you're afraid of the person. So you're like, I can't stand up to this person or say anything or fight back because that's just going to make it worse. And so we start to walk on eggshells. We start to try to avoid conflict. We start to try to please them in every way possible. And you exhaust yourself trying to do that because it's never enough. And, and nothing changes. It just keeps getting worse. And then it started to be, there were a few times where I stood up to this person and then he would threaten me that if this ever happened again, it would be worse and things like that, and tried to scare me and intimidate me. And it worked. And we tried to keep it from people knowing about it for so long, and I just became totally exhausted. And totally, I started to feel like I, as a person, didn't matter or exist anymore. And I think that's part of why I allowed it to go on for so long. And I allowed it to get to the point that it got to. You know, and I didn't leave because I was strong one day and brave and, you know, pounded my chest and said, I'm not going to take this anymore. You know, sometimes when I tell people about this, they'll say to me like, oh, well, that's so brave. Not really. And I'm not saying that because I don't deserve any credit. I just want to be clear about the reason why I left was because I was finally so afraid for my life, for myself, for my kids. I felt afraid. I felt so terrified that I couldn't go on in that anymore. It wasn't because I didn't want to be treated like that anymore and I was going to stand up for myself. Because that strength, that type of strength, it can't be found in yourself in that situation. I don't think, I say these things, but I'm speaking only on from my own experience. I was not able to find any type of love for myself and strength. I had been worn down and beaten down so much. And I already wasn't somebody that felt really great about myself. I wasn't really somebody, I was able to pretend like I did. I was able to act confident. And it surprised people when I did start telling people what had been going on. They were like, the Dawn Simon I know would never allow that. She would never tolerate that. And I don't know if maybe that was a challenge for him. That part of my personality. I don't know. Sometimes I think that. But I didn't come across as that kind of person. And I was able to hide it well. And then, you know, in the end, I didn't have whatever self-respect or self-love I had in the beginning of that relationship was completely gone by the end of it. So it really wasn't about any sort of bravery. And I say this to people, I say this for the purpose of people who are going through it, people that are being abused. Maybe someone is listening that is an abuser and they need to see the other side. Or maybe someone that's listening knows someone that's being abused or has been abused. You know, this is a complicated... Physical abuse isn't just physical. It's complicated. It's mental. It's emotional as well. There's a lot that goes into it. And you don't see it happening until it's too late. You feel it's too late. And it's such a tangled web. And it's so scary to try to figure out how you're going to get out of it. You know, for months after I got out of it, I was still scared. Maybe even years. I was afraid. And I lived in fear. And I'd lay my head down at night, and when I would hear a noise outside, I felt afraid. There's a power over you that comes over you. This person has power over you in a way that is not easily understood by someone that hasn't been through it. So I'm here to say you can get out of it if this is something that you can relate to. Find someone that you trust and that you know will not judge you, and that you know, and maybe it has to be a counselor. I don't know. But find somebody that you trust and tell them, and that will help you get just a little bit of power back. And that will help you feel like you're not alone and that you're supported. And then you can start making steps towards change in your life. But no one deserves it, and no amount of abuse is okay. No small little thing that you could think of that seems like it's not that big of a deal. It's a big deal. And it's, even if it's doesn't seem like much, it will grow. I can almost bet on that. It will grow. The problem will grow. And the bigger it gets, the smaller you get. So, I don't know if in that situation you can start to love yourself and stand up for yourself and feel a power within yourself to fight back. I don't know. In my experience, not. I just had to get out. And then I started to rebuild. And I will continue to rebuild the strength and the love for myself, that I would never let that happen again. But none of these things are easier overnight. And I don't think that they're really talked about a lot. And I think that when things aren't talked about a lot, they go on ignored, and they go on, hidden. And the people that are going through that they go on suffering. And there's just misunderstanding. And I think that we can start here, where we can bring awareness and bring understanding. Because by not having understanding, and if you're a victim and you don't have understanding from other people, that will keep you quiet. So I think it's just as important for people who aren't going through abuse in a relationship. I think it's important for them to learn and understand it. That's equally as important as it is for the victim and the abuser to learn. They need to learn. Everybody should learn about it. Because the ignorance is keeping people silent. The content provided on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only, and as a self-help tool for you and your own use. If you are in need of support, please do not delay in seeking mental health advice from a professional. I am not a mental health practitioner. I am simply sharing my own experiences here on this podcast. Thank you for listening to the Queen of Serious Talks. If you feel that this podcast would benefit a friend, please feel free to share it with them. And if you'd like to support this podcast, there is a link in the description. Thanks again.